Hey, knee jerk in the curtain, reaction video. How are you? Very excited about this one. I've had to hold this one off for days, almost damn near a week, so I could give it the proper attention. But the proper attention I shall give it. While it's not the concluding chapter of the Underage Chronicles, it's the last one. Chapter 5 and 6 are already out. I saw people commenting on this chapter, which is chapter 4, saying, I can't wait to see the next chapter. You can actually read them in order now. He released like 1, 2, 5, 6, and then 3 and 4. And so this is the conclusion. And there's a reason he saved it for last, I am gathering. I'm very excited to read it. We're just about to jump into it. I'm going to do an unboxing because these things are piling up. And I got my solo freaking cup with Daenerys. So, got a drink. Excited to go. We're gonna open one. Which one should I open? This one. It's more of a Jeff G kind of color and design there on the outside. Again, thank you to the people who get me these things. Oh, a rare note. I've got you this to help you with your charitable endeavor. Oh, this must be something to help inspire me for the Marvel Contest of Champions that I play for 24 hours to raise money for the Children's Hospital. Now I really can't wait to see what this shirt is. There's other stuff in here too. Awesome. Oh, sweet. I didn't even know this was a thing. Apparently there's an old school shirt for Marvel Contest of Champions that they found me. I'm definitely gonna, I'm gonna wear it for this bad boy, and I'm gonna wear it most assuredly for that 24 hours when I am raising that money. By the way, I put that link below in the description. So please, people have already started donating money, which is very inspiring for me. Yeah. And one guy that hasn't donated money to it is Jeff G. Maybe he will after he sees this. But I ain't one to gossip. Let's get to this bitch. All right. This is the first time I'm looking at it. So this is my genuine reaction. I'm nervous. I'm nervous to do this because I just want it to be great. When Jeff started doing these, I knew they would be good. I did not know they would be great. And now they are great. And I think chapter 3, which was the first one that I reacted to on these videos, was the best one. So my expectations for this, I think there's a reason Jeff saved this story for last, even though chronologically it's not last. And I think it's because it's the one that kind of was the closest and nearest and dearest to him. And his writing skills are sharpening every time. So I expect him, my expectations are that he's going to bust out a bunch of tricks. And I say that in a good way. I think he's going to bust out a couple of things that he's done that have definitely worked. And I can't wait to read this thing. But I am nervous because I want it to be fucking great. And I'm going to be totally honest with my reactions as I read it. Okay. Here we go. Underage Chronicles, Chapter 4, Two-Notch Massage Parlor, Loss of Virginity. And Jeff, as always, is so good. Where did we leave Batman and Robin last episode? When Chapter 3 left off, we've been banished from our current hangout of Leather and Lace for being idiots. And while there were other clubs to frequent in Charlotte, the incident had kind of soured us on the biker strip clubs of Charlotte. It had been fun, but we wanted more than just touching at this point. We were now ready for the next step on our journey and began to try and find our next goal to conquer, a bona fide whorehouse. Wow. Bonafide Whorehouse would be a great name of a college band. What a beautiful word that is. Whorehouse. Sounded like Shangri-La to me. I'd seen them in movies, but I had no idea if such a place really existed, particularly in Columbia, South Carolina. How would one find such a place? There was no one older to ask, and any inquiries made in the adult bookstore were met with stern glares and being asked to exit the establishment. Oh, wow. I like that because it's again, Jeff is becoming better and better at showing, not telling. So he just takes us to a different spot where they're at. I mean, you can see this if this was a movie, right? You would get this thing wordlessly of them asking the proprietor of these adult bookstores, and then just basically great comedy moment. And again, instead of him saying, every time we try, like, it's just he's so good at setting things up visually and in your mind's eye and sort of jumping us around in time and capturing a lot of information through exposition, but it's not a lazy exposition. Lazy exposition is like a narrator in a movie. That's why they say you're not really supposed to do it, because it's just lazy. Jeff does not, he goes to the sort of narrative voice less and more to this giving us little glimpses, especially when he sets up comedic moments. He's becoming very good at writing comedy, which is incredibly hard to do. It's why a lot of guys, it just doesn't work when wrestlers have tried to put stories down in a book. They just aren't funny. I don't know what to tell you, but there's a number of guys, when they tell stories, are incredibly funny out loud, just not written down. Jeff is mastering the art of doing comedy through writing. Just phenomenal. Sorry, I move on. We had seen Streetwalkers on Two Notch. And I like that he doesn't have to tell you what Two Notch is. He just lets you know, like through context, right? But when we tried to approach them, they wanted nothing to do with a car that had two 16-year-old boys in it. We may as well have been the Duke lacrosse team. Oh, hot damn. Brutal. Brutal. There were escort services in the phone book, but not only was it expensive, we had no place for them to come to, so we would have had to add a hotel room to the expense. I had noticed there were houses on Two Notch with boarded over windows, and someone finally hipped me, I love hipped, that those were massage parlors, aka whorehouses. I looked them up in the yellow pages and started calling the Two Notch locations to ask some pertinent questions. Again, great use of language. The use of pertinent is instantly comedic, because you can just see this guy like flipping through the yellow pages and asking this like very serious questions. They, however, were not interested in answering my questions like, how much to fuck, or what's a blowjob cost? It's fair to say that subtlety has never been my strong suit. They usually immediately hung up, and we were still in the dark of the cost. Finally, someone, after just ignoring what I asked, told me it was $25 for a half hour and $40 for an hour. Now, I just assumed that $25 covered some actual sex, so we made plans to hoard some money and soon visit. My friend couldn't stand waiting, so he loaned me $25 and we were off that weekend to lose our virginity, or at a bare minimum, at least get blown. Wow. Wow. The actual thought of massage was nowhere on our mind, as we assumed it was just code for sex, and we just knew our $25 would cover everything that we wanted. We were doing a lot of assuming, and we would unfortunately find out there's a big difference between a whorehouse and massage parlor, and not in a good way. Oh, now we're being set up, which is something that Jeff doesn't usually do, which is set us up to be disappointed, which tells me that we're not going to be disappointed ultimately. But it's great. He does this relationship with the reader thing that Jeff does, I would say, instinctively. And it's sort of taking you on this journey, ups and downs. Let's see, makes me want to read more, and so I shall. We parked behind the building, and as we prepared ourselves, I could tell for both of us this was a different kind of fear and trepidation than the others. We had said very little on the way there. And this was closer to hyperventilating anxiety than just simple nervousness. Wow, he puts us into a state there, physically, emotionally. So he was afraid. And Jeff, sort of famously in the other chapters, was not afraid. So this was very, very telling, right? He said it was close to hyperventilating anxiety than just simple nervousness. So we're definitely on the tip of like, he's terrified of what's going to happen. Not that either of us would have admitted to such thoughts, but looking back, it was almost palpable. The excitement of what lay behind that door had us paralyzed with fear, but more importantly, buzzing with excitement. It's amazing how close those things are, aren't they? We sat there deathly still in a cloud, waiting on the other to say something. This is interesting because usually we don't get a lot about the relationship between Jeff and his cohorts who he's on these adventures with, which I find very interesting that we don't. Right? Um, Finally, I asked, "You ready?" He replied, "Yes," and we both exited the vehicle with smoke billowing out behind us. Aha! We rang a bell and were led into the front room where we immediately got carted and peppered with questions. My heart was in my throat as I tried to answer questions like how much time I wanted and which girl. There were 4 to choose from, and since I went first, I got first pick. I like that. And since I went in first, I got first pick. There's something about the way that that sentence flows. A couple of the sentences in the beginning I think are a little wonky, but this shows that Jeff is now comfortable writing this story and he wants to move on because he's just almost unconsciously doing this awesome thing where it's hard to explain, but I think you get what I'm saying. Um, there were 4 to choose from, and since I went in first, I got first pick. I chose the young blonde lady. Shocker. If you know Jeff, it doesn't shock you at all. I chose the young blonde lady wearing lime green hot pants and a blue tube top. She wasn't hot by any standard, but she wasn't unattractive, and I was pretty thrilled. We went to a room that had a bed and a bedside table and nothing else. Wow, that is some Spartan bareness there. She told me I could take my clothes off and lay in the bed. I noticed a bottle of baby oil on the table and wondered what it was for. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, she started spraying it on me. I was immediately confused and asked, "Isn't that going to taste terrible?" She laughed and asked, "What?" I replied, "The baby oil. Doesn't it taste bad?" She laughed again and said she didn't know. She had never tasted it. I laid there a second, still confused, and asked, "You're going to suck it, aren't you?" She told me they didn't do that there. But for me, she would make an exception, and that would only cost me $30 more. Her generosity clearly had no bounds, but that was $30 that I just didn't have. I was immediately disappointed and tried to negotiate more for the $8 that I did have. I managed to get her to flop her tits out and allow me to stick my fingers in for the $8, but I nearly broke them trying to get them under the hot pants. By the time I got them where I wanted, we were both finishing up, and that was that. I had made out and fingered a couple girls back in 8th grade, but that had been a couple of years prior, so I was excited to give my fingers a big whiff, but found disappointment in a smell of piss mixed with sweat. Well, shit, swing and a miss. Wow, does he hit you? Boom. Like, here comes the big whiff, and it smells like piss and sweat. Wow. A $33 hand job was not what I was hoping for, but I have to say it was an extraordinary hand job, and despite my disappointment of not getting what I expected, I left that night at least semi-satisfied. I never returned at that cost, but I have nothing but good memories of that night, despite my virginity still hanging around and asking, "What the fuck? Let's get this done." He personifies his virginity. He personified his virginity. Wow. The Jack Shack was not an option at that cost, so I wasn't quite sure where to look next. Then, I just got lucky. Ooh, end of paragraph, beginning of the next one. Very exciting. My friend had gone down to Texas for a week, and it was the same week my mom had gone out of town for work. I didn't know how to drive. Wow, it's a reminder of how young they were, right? But I had a pair of keys to her 1978 white Monte Carlo and thought I'd teach myself. I drove around the country roads for a while until I ended up in a ditch. Oh my God, dude. A man came along and helped me out, and I figured I'd better quit while I was ahead. I needed to get gas in the car, so I drove to the station, and as I pulled up, I scraped the car God, it's so painful. I scraped the car down the red poles that kept you from hitting the gas pump. Oh my God, a white car and red poles. Jesus. Oh, now the white car had red paint scraped all down the side. Fortunately, it was on the passenger side, which saves my ass later. Oh, he plants a little chestnut for us later. I like it. I got gas, drove home, cried, and then went to work trying to wash the red off of the car. I got most of the color out, but the scraping and denting were still there. I figured at this point I was screwed, so I might as well drive again. The rationale of youth. I love it. My mom had left me $20, oh boy, to buy food with, but I decided I would go to wrestling on Tuesday at the Township Auditorium, even though I had no idea how to get there. I lived in LRMO all the way to the lake, and I was a good 25 miles away. I knew it was on Taylor Street, but once I got downtown, I was driving in circles trying to figure out where I was and how to get where I was going. Down Columbia is laid out in a very easy grid with all the major streets crossing each other, but I didn't know that then. And since I was always reading in the car whenever riding somewhere, I didn't even have a cursory idea of how to find anything. Jesus. This is a journey. I already didn't know how to drive and was doing that, so not knowing where something wasn't going to stop me. I wasn't nearly as nervous driving as I should have been, but I was starting to get pretty pissed off about being lost. I was about to explode in anger. Oh boy, if you know Jeff, you know what that means. As I'd already missed bell time and was still lost. I was making a U-turn when I noticed a young lady standing on the street in front of the Assembly Street IHOP. I pulled up and asked if she needed a ride, and she said yes. Brass balls. I thought that she didn't look like a hooker or what I thought a hooker would look like. Plus, Two Notch Road was the hooker stroll, not Assembly Street. She was college age and dressed like a student. She smelled very nice, and I just figured I'd be giving her a ride. When she got in, she asked if I wanted a date. I had no clue what that meant, so of course I just replied yes. Exciting. She said we could go to her house, and I was trying to be cool and hold some light conversation as I tried to maneuver the car in the right direction. She directed me to her place, which was a duplex over by the governor's mansion just a few miles away. My driving was obviously terrible, and she starts asking me questions like my age and if I know how to drive. I say I'm 20, and of course I know how to drive. We arrive at her place, and after entering, she informs me it's $20 for the date. I was planning on spending $10 on the wrestling, which was half my food budget for the week, but now it was looking like I wasn't eating that week as I pulled out the $20 and gave it to her. Her place felt hotter than hell, and she had red scarves over the lamps in the bedroom, and the lighting made me dizzy. She took her clothes off and lay down on the bed and opened her legs wide as I just stood there looking. I was mesmerized, and I have no idea how long I stood there looking before she said something that woke me from my hypnotic trance. I peeled my clothes off and immediately stuck my face between her legs to get a taste. She went, "Ooh, you're one of those." And as I pulled my face away, I replied, "Nah, I just wanted to know what it tasted like." It was far better than the piss sweat smell I had gotten on my hands, so that was a relief. When I put it in, I thought it was the greatest moment of my life. Fortunately, I had relieved myself a few times prior that day, so I was actually able to go something approximating 2 or 3 minutes before finishing up. I don't really remember what else may have been said as I dressed, as I was in a cloudy, narcotic-like euphoric state, like I was floating on a big old cloud of titties. However, once I was back in the car, I realized I had no idea where I was or how to get home. Oh, shit. Remember, kids, this is way before GPS. You know? You'd think that'd be a concern, but as I drove around in circles trying to find my way, I decided I need to catch a reflective jerk while driving. A reflective jerk. One of those great phrases that you don't get what that he means right away. You sort of have an intonation of the idea, and then you think about it, and it becomes funnier and funnier. Reflective jerk. thinking. Yeah. So I focused on that as well as driving. Damn, and they're worried about people texting and driving. I should have been trying to find my way out of there, but priorities. So funny. This is the funniest one that Jeff has written. Not just because of the situations, but he's obviously enjoying this trip down memory lane. That's another thing about Jeff's writing, I think, that works very well, is he enjoys reliving these experiences. And he's not afraid to self-deprecate. And he's being insanely honest throughout this thing. It's really shocking how honest and how everything is just put out there. I'll read that line again. I should have been trying my way out of there, but priorities. I'm sure this likely reads insane to some, but it became my go-to move on every drive home from every casual sexual encounter I ever had. Got to catch that reflective while it's still fresh in your mind, because once it's over, it's on to the next one. Wow. I knew what my goals were, and I put in work to make them all happen. This first time was the pebble that started the avalanche. I eventually figured out where I was when I saw the governor's mansion again, and as I tried to make a U-turn, I went up on an island and hit a sign from behind, knocking it over. Jesus. As I came off the island, I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw it was a no U-turn sign I had hit. That made me laugh, and I was soon on the interstate and headed home, a man reborn. I caught a second reflective on the long ride home. What a mess. From that point forward, I had a different level of confidence that surpassed all the phony bravado that had gotten me to this point. I was no longer phony. It was no longer phony. It was real. I walked with a swagger with my head held high as I realized that I was officially the baddest motherfucker I knew. Nothing that anyone said mattered anymore. I was truly the king of my own domain. I might have been a weirdo in high school, but I wasn't a virgin, and that was good enough for me. I knew things had drastically changed for me, and now having crossed the finish line, I knew I wanted to continue to run that race, and did every opportunity that I had to do so. Things couldn't be better. And then my mom returned home without noticing any damage to the car. Icicle, Mom hit me in the glasses. She left to go back out of town the next day and parked her car at the airport. When she returned, she told me how her car had been hit in the airport parking lot. I had not only lost my virginity, but I had gotten away with taking the car and going on this crazy solo adventure. Jackpot, baby! What could possibly rise up and be the next big adventure? Only one place could satisfy what was needed next, and that was the big time in the big city. We knew we had to make our way to the sleaze capital of the world, the 40 Deuce, New York City. Don't miss finding out how we make that happen in the next installment of the Underage Chronicles, Chapter 5. And the quote, "They say the first time ain't the greatest, but I tell you, if I had a chance to do it all again, I wouldn't change a stroke, 'cause baby, I'm the most, with a girl as fine as she was then. Oh, no, no." Overall review, first reaction, it's the best one yet. I agree with the comments that I read down below. It's the best one he's written. There were a couple little typo things or things I would have done differently, but they're minor things. They were sort of like structural things within a sentence, and that was in the beginning. Once it started flowing, it was going, and it was great. And I don't know if he meant to do this. I tend to think he did, because he's proven himself to be a great writer, which is when he is lost, we're lost reading the story. Because it's like, well, we're getting a lot of details about being lost, but you're not bored with the details, but you're a little surprised because you know what's about to happen because he's told you what's going to happen, and and all of that. But then when that girl comes out of nowhere, it's you as a reader experience the same sensations as the person in that, but in a completely different way. From yours is from the writing itself context, where you're like, okay, where's this going? At the same time where he's lost, and then once he's revealed, it reveals itself to you. Very powerful. It's the difference between literature and just writing a story. Jeff G has attained the level of it being actual quality literature. Can you get a better reaction than that? Go read that shit, motherfuckers. Stephen Platt.